So let's take a look at setting up some lights inside of our scene. Lights are going to be under your Create tab, and across the little top bar here we see a button that looks like a light. Let's click on that one. We've got two different types of lights. We've got standard types and photometric lights. For this, we're just going to use our standard lights. And a good standard light to start with, we'll just use our target direct. I'm going to zoom out on my front view just a little. And let's just left click and drag. The first part of the left click sets the light. As we drag out, it sets a target. If you use the free direct, then there is no target on it. You can also select right in here to change out the target if you want. I'm going to right click to end that process. I'm going to go over to my Modify tab, and I want to modify this a little bit. You can see that there's two cylinders here. The first one is the main intensity of the light, the other is the fall off of the light, and we can get to those parameters right in here. We have our intensity, our color, attenuation, and we've got our directional properties right down here for our hot beam and our fall off. So I'm just going to bump this one up a little bit, make sure that he's completely covered with some lighting. That looks good. Our intensity, this is how bright the light is. For instance, if we were to bump this up and then do a render, we can tell that it's really, really bright. It's going to blow out a lot of the highlights on the object. If we were to bump this down, we'll pull the multiplier down to something really low. Let's render that one out. We can see that it gets really dark. So the lighting for the multiplier is just how bright is that light, how much energy is coming out of that light, and that's going to affect the object, the material, and everything in the scene. So by default this is set to 1. Let's just take a render at 1 and see where it's at. And in here we're not too bad. We've got some heavy shadows. The shadowing can be adjusted. The lighting right now is going to be the light on that, the color on that light. Typically it's going to be right about at the white. I'm going to actually adjust this a little bit to get into that blue, a soft blue color right in here. Okay, so that's going to get us through our intensity. We don't really have to worry about any kind of decay on the light. The lighting parameters right in here are good. We have a circle light. You could change it to a rectangle. It simply changes out the shape of that light. We'll leave it with a circle. Our advanced parameters, we don't need to worry too much about this. If we were projecting an image through the light, we could do it right here with our projector map. Our shadow parameters, right now we can change the density of that shadow. How dark is that shadow? If we were to go in and make that a little bit lighter, and let's make our light a little more over here. Now we've got this one. I'm just going to pull this a little more to the front. There we go. This is going to be the density of the shadow. Now we also have our shadow option. I'm just going to click on that one. I'm going to set it to the advanced ray traced shadows, and let's just render that out. There we go. Clean up some of that in there. Now if we were to bump this up to a density, we can bump that up. Let's take a peek at what we get there. We can definitely see that the self-shadowing on the object is much darker than it was before. And for our needs, we really want it to be something soft. We don't want a really hard shadow. So I'm going to put this at about a 0.2. And we're just watching right there where that self-shadowing is happening. It's a nice little cut, not too dark. In fact, we might go just ever so slightly a little bit more. We'll go to a 0.3. Now you notice what I'm doing here is just basically changing a value, rendering it, taking a look at the result, and that is a big part of what setting up your lighting rigs and the lighting schemes inside of your scenes is all about. Same with the materials. It's making subtle adjustments, making big adjustments so that you can find out, what is it doing, and then making subtle adjustments to get it to where you want it. Alright. Let's go ahead and do a couple more things in here. We've got some advanced options that we're fine with. We've got transparent shadows that we don't need to worry about, or the atmospheric effect. So the basic of our lighting right now is pretty good. I think we could turn up our multiplier effect just a little bit more. I go to about a 1.5, 1.6. Looks a little bit better, but it does start to blow out our highlights some, so I'm going to just pull that down. I want more of that absorption of that blue into the model. There we go. Okay, so as we can see, we've got a pretty good light to get started with. Now we could add additional lights all inside of the scene, and we'll certainly put a couple more in there. But we can also adjust some of our material. Now we notice that when we render this out, we're getting kind of a highlight spot. Now we really don't want that highlight spot right in here. We're looking more for the reflections inside the scene to define that. So we could change our material type up if we want to. If you like what you're getting right now, you can leave it, but I do want to introduce underneath our shader basic parameters. We've got different shader types. We have a blend, metal, a Phong shader, Strass shader, and our anastrophic. So just to give you an example, if we were to go to the metal shader property, we go in there, and then let's take a render of that and see what we get. There we go. We can see this nice little highlights down all of these lines. We get a nice softer highlight spot that goes back to a deeper shadow on the back. So something like this you look at and you go, it looks a lot different than the other. It was just changing one of these parameters in here just to kind of remind us what it looks like. Let's just make a copy of our object and we'll render this again, but let's just render this back with our blend. And we'll do a render. So you can definitely see a difference between the two and the effect that you get. So we'll make a copy of this guy, and the next thing we can do is let's try it with a different one. So I'm going to go in, let's say, with an anastrophic. I'm actually going to bump my specular level up a little more on this guy, and let's pull out our glossiness. And let's render that one. There we go. That's got a nice soft fill as well. It's got nice highlights going down it. So you can tell just making subtle adjustments on some of the shader types or the parameters can really change things up for us. And between them, maybe pick out the one that you enjoy the most, the one that you feel represents it the best. I'm going to go somewhere between the metal and the anastrophic. Let's take a peek at our metal real quick to see if we play with our highlights just a little bit more in here. And let's soften it out somewhere about right there. Let's take a render of that. It's going to deepen that a little bit more for us. Let's pull that back down. And again, this is one of those fun parts of just experimenting with the different materials, adjusting the parameters to try to get a little bit different effect. You can see in here we start to move it more towards an anastrophic fill. And let's just pull this back down here. Let's pull that back down there. Let's just do a little bit more subtle. Alright, I do like the effect, but I think I'm going to go ahead and go for our anastrophic. it's a good material to get used to using, or shader type to get used to using. And for us, anisotrophic's going to work just fine. We can bump up our highlights. We can let that go out a little bit more here. And our anisotrophy here, we'll take that one out there. Let's try this one. Maybe a little bit too bright in there. Alright, we've got a nice smooth color, nice simple little highlights. This is definitely what we are looking for our little guy. Alright. So I think we can be happy with that type on it, and the next thing we could do is go into our other material real quick. Now notice when I changed it, it does change out the specular and the color, so I'm going to go back in and grab my dark color. It does hang on to the map though, so our reflection is still in there. Actually, I'm going to take this just all the way to black. Let's render that. There we go, we get that nice highlight right in there. That looks good. And actually on the white here, I think we're actually good with that one. We'll leave it as is. We can take a peek over here at the black at the back of the leg, and it looks like we could do for maybe just a little bit of a highlight on there. Let's just go in here and darken that one up. We won't go too much, not too crazy with it. There we go. Just enough to catch that a little bit better. There we go. Alright, so our materials, after looking at our lighting and our materials together, we're definitely a little bit closer to where we want to be. Now the other thing that we want to do is, when we look at our object, the thing that helps a reflection is to have something to reflect. So in the next video we're going to set up a little basic stand, a little turntable stand for it, and then put some sort of faux lights inside of the scene so that we have something to reflect on top of our character. And we'll do that next.